one thing that occurred to me is, people are implementing all of these changes because they want to grow their business, they want to expand internationally, or in wherever markets they are. And I was at the Travolution Summit yesterday, where one of our members, SDL, was talking about going global faster and expanding faster. And he actually said, really what we're going to see is going global instantly, and things happening, using technology that we can expand and implement sort of almost instantly and can roll out once we've done it once. Are you finding that with your clients, that if they do a template, they can use it elsewhere, or do we still need to deal with each market individually? Maybe Rolf, you might want to kick off. I think also thinking about your company anyway, simple view is you are a US company expanding into Europe. I mean, what's been your experience in terms of the speed and how that's changing?
Yeah, I think based on the US market, what we see is the sites are so much more like each other, because the market is more or less, an American is American in many ways. When we see in Europe, it's absolutely the opposite. So each market, we have to look at the culture, we have to look at the way they are used to use the websites. So it's each market gets their own unique setting, unique focus, and unique booking engines. Each country probably wants their local booking engines that they know about. So this is going into Europe is a major challenge compared to the US market.
Thank you.
From my point of view, I thought I'd tackle this question from the point of view of design and proposition. I think it is now really easy to put a new shop front up in a different country. The problem is, if it's just a shop front, you get found out quite quickly. So I don't know if any of you have ever been to countries where brands have first started being sort of exposed to the first time. So, for example, McDonald's, say, 15, 20 years ago in European countries. The experience when you walk up to the front of the shop was the same, or looked the same. But when you went in and you started to experience that business, it was completely different. And I think that's something that people often forget when they're looking at expanding internationally and using online as their primary sort of source of doing that. There's a lot that's required to run a business, and you shouldn't forget to put it all in place just in the rush to get something launched in a new country. Because if you do that, obviously the longer term impact on your brand and the perception of that business within that country is sort of pretty negative.
Chris?
CDN's a very quick way of expanding internationally very quickly into markets where you don't necessarily have a presence. But you have to, that's fine for like Europe and North America and those sort of markets, and probably the majority of Southeast Asia. But again, we talked about China, and China is a big market. India is an emerging market for a lot of organizations, but now even with Russia now, and people may or may not be aware of it, but they're also now building a Great Firewall of Russia. So the Chinese that actually designed and built the Great Firewall of Russia are now working with the Russians, and they're going to do exactly the same in Russia. So again, Russia want to control content that is coming into to Russia from outside. So that's a really interesting development, and that will again have an impact again on companies that are expanding internationally but care about those markets. So there's a lot of other things they're going to have to think about rather than just building the website, in the local language, etc., etc. There's a lot of other things they will have to take into account.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone have a question they'd like to address to the panel? Well, while you're thinking, there's something that we struggle with a lot at ETOA when we're implementing these changes is KPIs. How do I know this has been worthwhile? Am I still doing a good job? What should I be measuring? So I guess my question to each of you really is, of the things that you've spoken about today, what would be the top one or two KPIs that people would use as their yardstick to know, okay, that was worth doing, or no, let's ditch that and do something else? Yeah, well,
I can start there. Working with the National Tourist Bureau, they have different KPIs than a DMO, of course. The National Tourist Bureau, they want to have as much traffic as possible and be able to feed back to the government how many visitors they have had on their site. The DMO, by the way, they are interested in their conversion rate. So they have different KPIs which you have to be aware of when you design the site. So today we have been working with lots of you guys in the meetings, and some of you are of course very interested in the conversion rates, and that is where you are measured by your boards, and we have to take care of that when we design the websites for travel operators. So I think it's very much based on where you are in the different for the tourists part.
I think KPIs have to be relevant to the organisation that you're working with. So as an example of that, I was involved in a pitch recently for one of the regulators in the UK, and their main KPI on online was around speed of service. So without giving away who they are, part of their service was around managing complaints about car parking fines, and the government regulates that, and the government says you should fix that problem regardless of whether it's a digital or a phone channel of inquiry within 7 minutes. So that's obviously a very specific example. When it comes to the performance of websites, obviously there's the stuff that you'd naturally see in a report from a website company, such as bounce rates and all that kind of stuff, and conversion rates, as you mentioned. But I think it's really important to look at the impact on the bottom line, because it's very easy for web agencies to get completely sort of obsessed by the idea of a conversion in terms of a sale or whatever else. But if there's no margin in it, and your web agency is delivering you a really high conversion rate on sale of something which isn't actually that valuable, then there's no revenue to reinvest the next year. So I think when it comes to KPIs and ROI in general, I think the best thing to do is just to make sure you're having conversations down at quite a granular level, and also that the KPIs are relevant to the organisation you're working with.
Thanks. Chris?
Yeah,
what
I mean,
can we
very
do?
similar. I mean, obviously, a lot of customers we work with, I mean, obviously, first and fundamentally, they obviously, go and test your website, right? How does your website run today? Fundamentally, how does it load? And, what does it load in Australia versus, as I said, Southeast Asia, Europe, North America, if that's where your audience is? Then basically look to work with a CDN, right, and look at where the performance improvements are. And there are a lot of third-party tools that we use, that customers use as well to validate that. So it's not a case of the CDN saying we've improved your overall performance by X percentage, which then potentially does correlate back through to bounce rates, reducing bounce rates and increasing conversion rates. And pretty much all our customers that sort of trial and POC with us are using these tools as a benchmark to justify the ROI on the investment.
Oh, yeah, Rolf.
But what it comes down to is that when you do a tender, when you set up the KPIs, that is very important for us as suppliers to be able to provide you the right tools, the right price, and the right marketing mix. So if you, together with the board of directors, together with the marketing department, set up your KPIs for the next generation of sites, you'll have a much better product, and it's will have the questions asked right. You will get the better product.
Just another add-on onto that. Agencies are generally quite vain. So if you share really business critical KPIs with them, they'll probably go out of their way to try and achieve them for you, even if they're not directly related to the work that they're doing. So it's useful to share, if you do have top level KPIs over customer retention or customer acquisition or profitability, share them. You might get some good stuff for free.
Thank you. Anybody want to ask a question? Well, I think I will wrap up the session with a final question then. You've all shared some useful tips and insights into how we can improve our businesses digitally. If I'm starting tomorrow, I guess this is to each of you, what's the most important thing of the things you've discussed in your presentations? What should I start with tomorrow? If I'm going to go, yes, right, I love all this, I need to start doing it. What should I do first? I guess.
I would have started to go down to the IS department, get the earphones out of the guy, get off the chewing gum, get off the sunglasses, ask him right into the face. I have some really serious questions about our website. So, and give me a Google account, Google Analytics account, so I can follow this myself, and I will have weekly meetings with you until we have settled it. That's what I would have done.
Thank you.
In the spirit of collaboration, I'd probably be a bit less aggressive. But I like the sentiment. I think that the best thing you can do is just try and get as many people as you possibly can to engage in a conversation. If you look at those 4 squares I put on the slide before and just try and work out where you're weak as an organisation. And if you don't have people who can help you, bring other people in.
So we are the good and the bad guys.
Yes,
right?
yeah, good cop, bad cop. Yeah.
And I think for me it's quite similar. I mean, if you care about China and it's a market that you're looking to tap into, whether it's in 6 months, 12 months, 2 months, the most important thing you have to do right now is look at making sure you have an entity in China. You have to have an office in China for it to work, if you're going to make it work.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else?
Can I ask a quick question? Sorry.
Of course.
You mentioned the north and south divide in China. Could you cover that again very quickly? What do you mean by that? In terms of
Yeah,
doing business?
just
Is it Beijing versus Hong Kong, or?
Yeah, just fragments. So within mainland China. So obviously here in the UK we have Sky, we have BT, we have Virgin in terms of ISP providers, and they pretty much cover whatever 98% of the UK market, but they all interconnect with each other. Right, so they all talk to each other, and traffic goes across each other's network. So in China, you can have China Telecom, and you can have China, and they don't connect with each other. They don't talk with each other. So and that's what I mean by fragmentation. So you can have, as you said, you can be hosting with China Telecom in Beijing, for example, and you may have reasonably good performance to customers in that area, right? But because there's no connection to get to the end users in southern China, or southern mainland China, that's where the fragmentation is. So therefore, they'll have a very bad experience, and the ones north, okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well then, please join me in thanking all 3 of our speakers. Thank you very much.